and I was just, what is this? Are these people serious? It was just so crazy.
Happy Monday, folks, and a special treat for all of you today. I'm just back from a trip to Sweden where I interviewed Dr. Jakob Nordengård on the launch of his new book, Temple of Solomon. It's a fascinating read. I went through it twice before I sat down on stage live with him at the event and interviewed him on it. So a really fascinating story from the 1500s all the way up to the present on all of the characters who have influenced the organizations that are currently effectively ruining our world. So really hope you enjoy this one. I think it's a class act, and the atmosphere and the elocution or articulateness of Dr. Nordengård describing the story is just amazing, I think. So enjoy.
Okay, so fifth time lucky, Jakob. Great to be back.
Yes.
And yeah, as was mentioned there, so I'm a complex problem solver, corporate, and I'm interested in integrating all of the data in any problem. And when I discovered you in 2022 and I saw your talk, I was captivated because that was integrating the whole Rockefeller story, which is in a sense is the story of our times, and a lot of the challenges we're facing in the world and the lunacy, quite frankly, that we're facing, from trans to COVID-19 to CBDC, it all goes back to what you researched over a decade, so kudos. But today we're going to talk about your new book, Temple of Solomon.
Yeah.
And I went through it, and it is a stunner, and I'll have to tell everyone out there, you have to read it twice, I think, because there's so much in there. It's incredible value. But for me, the killer thing about Temple of Solomon is, rather than just going back to the 1900s and John Dee and his father, you've actually gone back several hundred years to the early 1500s and given the full context of the crazy ideologies that have essentially educated and driven the people who are now kind of our elites who are causing all the trouble in the world. And just to give a quick read, and then we'll get on to you to talk about it, the Milner Group, the Round Table, the East India Company, Chatham House, CFR, Council for Foreign Relations, Bank of International Settlements, and I could go on and on. You have put several hundred years of, quite frankly, sinister groups into perspective. So what's your initial comment on the book overall? Am I somewhere close to the bone?
Yes, because I wanted to give the history behind it all. This is an idea I developed during my PhD studies. I knew there was a lot of more things than, I mean, the PhD studies was about European biofuels policy. But I found that a lot of the things that's happening in the modern era has deep historical roots. And it goes back a long way. As I was studying biofuels, I came in contact with the British East India Company and also the Dutch East India Company. And these companies were so important for everything that has developed since. And also I found connections with occult ideas, and I couldn't write about this in a PhD thesis. So I have tried to, it was like I have to do it sometime, and now the time came. And I also had this idea. During my PhD, I started my band, Wardenclyffe, and it was as a way to express myself more freely, because sometimes I got angry about what happened in the world and how certain actors was trying to influence other people and hijacking movements that I was a part of. And I got so upset, so I had to let some steam off. And because I couldn't write my anger in a PhD thesis, it's academic work. So I put it into music and the Wardenclyffe project instead.
Excellent, yeah. And I heard you guys earlier today doing your sound checks, and you're certainly channeling that anger very effectively, I might say. So, you know, this book, as I say, it's a twice reader. And at first when I went into it and began to see all these things from the 1700s, the occult nature of some of these people, and we'll talk in a moment on Dr. John Dee, who I had heard of, but his story is absolutely fascinating. But there's all these things that would be seen as conspiracy-ish. But the beauty is in the book, it is cold and referenced all the way through. It gives an accurate referenced history, but it gives people the context of all these, quite frankly, crazy characters. They didn't just exist as crazy ideologues with hints of Satanism and magic and alchemy. They profoundly influenced many people who went on to be extremely powerful and have shaped our world in a sense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And that is the astonishing thing. Now, you started, and I had to make notes, which I have never done for an interview before. I always go with what's in my head. I just felt I had to do notes here. The first chapter, Hal, I actually enjoyed the films 2001: A Space Odyssey. I didn't realize that Arthur C. Clarke was up to his neck in these nut jobs, but now I know. A fascinating film, but maybe we'll start on the first chapter, Hal, and what's happened since 9/11 and the whole COVID craziness?
Yeah, Hal is very interesting because one thing with Arthur C. Clarke, he was also wrote the foreword to a book called Macroshift by a Hungarian systems philosopher called Ervin Laszlo. A book that was published 2 days before 9/11 happened. And it talks about a great shift in international relations and how the world will change rapidly into a new system. And that's what we have been experiencing since that happened in 2001.
And as you called out, of course, the mass surveillance, the rise of the biosecurity state, the CIA, the tracking and tracing of everyone, it goes on and on. Like 9/11 was essentially, in a similar way to COVID-19, the Great Reset, it was a trigger event. It unleashed a totalitarian torrent on us, really.
Yes, it did. We didn't have that kind of surveillance, especially airports and so on, before that. So it just, that introduced a whole new way of thinking and insecurity.
Yeah,
really.
World changing, and we all felt it, we just didn't understand it at the time. You get into Dr. John Dee, and again, born in 1527, one would think that somewhat crazy characters from the early 1500s can't possibly have an influence. But then, and what I realized as I read this, what has dictated most of the catastrophes and the direction of the world for millions of years of Homo sapiens? It's been ideologies, religions.
Yeah.
We know that. So when you stop to think of it for a moment, you say, okay, hold on a sec. This isn't actually improbable after all. This is the normal way that unfortunately humans who are very gullible tend to behave. So maybe Dr. John Dee, in your own words from that chapter 2, give a flavor for John Dee and what he got up to.
Well, John Dee is a very, very fascinating character. He was the kind of Elizabeth I's own magician, you could say, court astrologer, And he was a brilliant mind. He was one of the most brilliant scientists of the time. And he had connections to all the big names in academia in the 1500s, like Tycho Brahe here in Scandinavia. And also a very fascinating character, because he was also one of the first spies. He is actually the one that inspired Ian Fleming to write James Bond. Because John Dee's, he had a number, 007, but he signed his letters with. And that's very interesting. The intelligence has always been very connected to occult ideas, because the intelligence, they are interested in secrets, keeping secrets, and also ciphers and all these things to transfer information. And John Dee, he worked for the Elizabeth I, and he went to continental Europe to with a mission. And the mission he had, that he talked about in the court, was we have to make England the greatest country in the world, more or less, and make a fleet that can take over the world and control the resources of the world. So that was the ideas, the ideology. And another part was to make things perfect. John Dee had this idea. He had learned about everything in the material world, but he wanted advice on how can we create a better world, a perfect world, can be perfectable world. And in order to get that information, he went to sources that it wasn't from the books. So before he went on his crusade in continental Europe, he started to contact the angels. And he had a scryer working for me called Edward Kelly, that was the medium to the angelic world, and they developed angelic magic and the thing was, because John Dee, he felt, I've learned everything about from the books. Now I have to know God's wisdom. So he started this kind of sessions, magical sessions, to get information, and wrote a lot of information about this. And in this plan, the angels talk about creating an empire. So that's fascinating to think about, that the ideas to the British Empire came from sessions John Dee had with a medium contacting the spiritual world. And then we know what happened. John Dee was the one that, it was he who said first the British Empire. It was his words. And during the years, I think, the years before John Dee died, England set its first fleet to America. Because John Dee, he thought it was that America was Atlantis, and it was, and he said also that this was talked a lot about Merlin and Arthur and the mythologies, and it was the right of the regent of England to inherit this and be the ruler of the world. And this started the colonial era for England, really.
Which set the rest of history, and the debates nowadays are, well, is it the State Department USA running everything, or many people argue it's still the Crown, you know, 400 years later, and it's hard to, but you know, one thing struck me is how genius is so close to madness, and this comes up again and again with these people. Their behavior and the angels and all of this kind of nonsense, you tend to laugh it off, but it's serious stuff because it is informing them, whether true or not. It only matters that they believe it. Same with all the religions in the world who have caused catastrophe and good things. It's whether they believe it or not. It's not whether it's nonsense. So this guy as well, I think Elizabeth, the Queen, yet they set off the armadas. He was linked deeply into Sir Francis Drake. I mean, he was massively instrumental in that empire.
But he got forgotten, written out of history because of these connections to the occult world.
Yeah, exactly. So the inspiration that led to real world events, which were enormous, well, okay, he gets kicked out because of the nonsense. But the Milner group, the Round Table group, which kind of came from his love of the Arthurian legends, etc., the East India Company and Chatham House. A lot of people will have heard about Chatham House, a bit like Tavistock Institute. These are all sinister globalist institutes. But it's fascinating to see how a lot of them are tied back to this period and the following years.
Yes, it is, because it was a continuation of the things that John Dee started, and they continued. We have Francis Bacon, his ideas of the New Atlantis, and how the British Empire was born, and the Round Table group just continued with these ideas on how to expand this British Empire, and Cecil Rhodes, of course, with the South Africa and the diamond trade and the gold. It has a lot to do with the control of the resources that John Dee talked about in the 1500s.
Absolutely, and Rhodes, I think, didn't he set up De Beers? And basically, I only found out, I don't know, 10 years ago, I didn't realize the diamond trade across the whole world is held in an iron fist. There's no free market. It's a complete monopoly. But that brings huge power.
Yes.
The corralling of resources, and we know, I think America has been involved in nearly 180 wars off its soil since World War II, and we know all about resources too. So this story that kind of started back then with characters like John Dee has continued and grown. And you touched on it earlier, but I remember reading the Da Vinci Code on an airplane going to America. And it was complete trash in terms of literature. But I was astonished at how it did so well. And something occurred to me. In spite of being a modern population who has iPhones and all this technology, and we've left behind official religion overwhelmingly, people yearn after Middle Ages, crypts, churches, ciphers. That was one of the reasons for its success.
Yeah.
And
people love this.
They love it, but also, unfortunately, the elites and myriad of these characters that have risen up, who would largely have sociopathic tendencies, I would suggest, they love it too. And this has given the kind of glue to tie together people who want money and power and run the world. This kind of stuff, this mystical mumbo jumbo, the Masonic rituals that seems so silly, to them it's not. It's part of the glue, I think, that ties them together. What do you think?
Well, it's the rituals. The rituals are very important to connect people. And I mean, we have it in the church, of course. But it's, you share experiences. And in the Masonic world, of course, you have certain rituals that it gets people to come together. They experience this, and they get a deep bond together, and that's important and also they learn to keep secrets. Yes, and they have to stay loyal to the brothers. So that's very important. And so Freemason has also been very important in intelligence. Secret societies have been this for a long time, or since the beginning, because John Dee, he influenced the Rosicrucian movement that then went on to influence the Masonic movement, and John Dee was a spy at his time. So it's, as I said, this is a part of this network. You keep secrets and you can transfer information through borders all over the world, and you stay loyal to your brother.
It's essentially creating a tribe of more importance to you than your own race, your own culture, that you can band together with people with the excitement of secrets and the promise of power over your fellow man.
Yes, because you can rise in the ladder, the hierarchy, and become more, be a master.
Hey all, just a brief break to remind you that these trips to interview these great people and help get the message out on what's going on in the world, they do cost quite a pretty penny. So really appreciate if at the links down below you can support me in some small way to help keep the mission alive. Thank you. Now back to Dr. Nordengård.
Exactly, which unfortunately draws the wrong type of person, but also creates the structures that elevates the wrong type of person.
Yeah.
And then when people talk about conspiracy theory, and this is something that occurred to me along those lines, the ordinary people who can't contemplate these secret groups, they think of it all as nonsense. It's so improbable that you could maintain secret groups at all levels of government. It's ridiculous. And yet we know that's been at work for all of human history. So as opposed to being improbable or fanciful, it's actually what I would see now as a grounded engineer and a technical person. I realize now this is the expected reality that I should expect to see. Quite the opposite. In terms of ritual, you reminded me, I interviewed Professor Matthias Desmet.
Yeah.
And I told him the story in the interview about how I was cancelled by around 8 friends that went back 40 years, wives and everything. I won't tell it here. But I told him that I was actually tolerated going against the lockdown, the masks, and all the stuff that was very embarrassing to them because they were in quite senior positions. But I was tolerated because they could accept that I had a point, and it turned out actually I was correct. And in August, they all accepted I was correct against all probability. So there it was.
Yeah.
So how was I cancelled in October, November? It was because I questioned the vaccine.
Yeah.
And Matthias said, Ivor, you questioned the ultimate ritual, and that's a bridge too far. I thought it was very insightful. Mm-hmm. Rituals are so important to people.
It is. Yeah. Mm.
Even in this day and age, as they say.
Yeah. Because it's we are humans, and that's how we work.
We resonate.
Yeah, we resonate with that.
As Matthias said, the natural frequencies of human psychology is kind of spiritual and wonderful. You mentioned the Rosicrucian movement.
Yeah.
Maybe just a little bit in that, because my wife actually was familiar with that from reading a lot of Shakespeare and stuff, and I wasn't. So Theosophy and Rosicrucians and the overlaps, along with what we've already mentioned, all of these are very powerful ideas. There is nothing so powerful as an idea. So maybe a little more on those guys.
Well, the Rosicrucians, they evolved out of, some say it was John Dee and his philosophies, and it was created in the early 1600s. And their idea was more or less the perfection of society. They had this vision about a better world, and they were influential in the Enlightenment, the science. A lot of the scientists of the day, and we shall remember that at that day the scientists, they were very more open for occult spiritual ideas. It came a split later, but and the Rosicrucians, they were very influential in the 1600s, and later developed into or inspired the Freemasonic movement. And everything is about the betterment. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's bad to strive to be a better person. But it's what a lot of cults says also. Join us and we can make you a better person. We can, I think the Freemason says, we make good men better. But it's a dangerous thing as well, because it's someone else that is directing. There is someone else that's you don't know when you become a part of that movement in the beginning, when you're an apprentice. What is it on the top of this? They don't know. So another one, the master is directing you. And is it for the betterment of you? Or what is it? And also, I also think it's good if you, as I said, it's good if you strive to be a better person. That's a good thing. But if you do it, as these movements want, on the whole world, it comes in utopian thoughts. Because that's the Rosicrucians and the Masons have had these utopian ideas of a perfect world, and the Theosophy talks about right human relations. We strive to create this perfect world order, and to do that, they have to change people. We have to change the minds of every man on earth to create this. And in order to do this, it will not be democratic or really based on free will or organic. You force these ideas on people, and you force the idea of an utopia. And as I point out in the book, utopia for you may be a dystopia for the rest of us, because it's your idea of an utopia. So what I say also, it's you can create a good world for yourself and your family. It could be hard as well, very hard just to keep a family together. But these movements, they want to do it on a world scale, and I don't think it can work out really. And I think we have seen it in the world, that this is and the wrong people get to be the master of this. Always, because this gives, an organization like this gives power to the one in the top. And we know what kind of people like to be on the top and have the power of an organization.
And when they do get the power, they may be somewhat benevolent at first, and then after a while their power hunger turns to wanting to really
gets corrupted.
People. Always. Though you could argue the corruption was in them, the seed was there, and then the seed flourished. All of these structures, and reading this book and going through them all, and I'm familiar with many of them at a high level, always on the road to disaster. And I'd say that as I have a huge admiration for a long, long time for the Stoics, a philosophy of improving yourself, individualism. I mean, I think it was it Marcus Aurelius or maybe Epictetus? And he basically says that if you look for witness from someone else or try and have someone else judge you, you have lost your integrity. If you need a witness, be your own.
Yeah.
So that is the true philosophy of humanity improving itself, which is the exact opposite of each and every one of the organizations in the book. They are, as you describe, the masters tell you how to be better and give the conditions. It's universal. It's cult. It's all cult. The UN is cult. The climate stuff is beyond cult. It's cult squared.
And it may not have been that in the beginning, but I think this organization corrupts themselves over time.
Yeah, it's almost a human fundamental that once you get a power and control hungry group together and they grow large, it's destined to become a dystopia at some point. You might have a golden age. I mean, look at communism. It's the same thing. A great idea. We'll all share. We'll all be happy. The communist regimes have caused the most death and suffering of all. I'm not sure there's an exception. There is no utopia, really, in human history when it is described as these people do.
Yeah, and it's certainly not a worldwide utopia. That's just a stupid thing, because all these people, all these groups, all these differences between people, it's impossible.
You know, the Green Fairy chapter, because I want to try and stick roughly to the structure, Aleister Crowley, you know, I mean, the sex stuff. Just a little bit on Aleister Crowley, people might be familiar with. And by the way, guys, he is up to his neck in all of these processes and machinations that have led to essentially the UN, the CFR, and the people we suffer under now. Aleister Crowley.
Yes, I describe this as he's the dark occultist.
Yeah.
He's so obvious. And also, he was also working for the intelligence services.
Always.
Always. And all these, and it's a lot of things written about Crowley, and he had this monastery in Italy with a lot of, he was actually thrown out of Italy because Mussolini thought he was too extreme. That says a lot.
And it was an anti-monastery. He had prostitutes.
Everything. Of course, it was an anti-monastery because he was, as I said, dark occultist. He was very open, and he wanted to create a new age,
a utopia.
Reversed utopia. I think in his case it was more like a dystopia. But he had this idea: do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's the Crowley thing. But very, very, also very fascinating person.
And he featured on I didn't realize this, on the cover of the Sgt. Pepper Beatles.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of celebratory type attention from the kind of rock people of the 60s.
And Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin, he bought Aleister Crowley's mansion, and also collected Crowley literature and everything. So it was very important for Page and also in the songwriting.
Yeah, and we see again how humans are drawn to this stuff, even if they're not particularly satanic themselves.
But it's fascinating. It's like we like watching that kind of movies, and we like to. We liked a movie with a psychopath, but we just get fascinated by these people. Yeah.
But of course, all the people who are, as you describe, which is most people, they don't realize all of this is playing out in the corridors of power. They think that's fanciful. You know, in the Aleister Crowley chapter, Theosophy and the Lucis organization came up. Maybe a little on how they came about, and particularly Lucis ends up as a key not informer, but integrated, crazy ideological society in my mind, but linked directly into, I think, UNESCO and the UN. And
yes,
these connections
very,
are
very
powerful.
much so. So it's Theosophy starts with Madame Blavatsky in the late 1800s, and Blavatsky, kind of strange Russian woman, comes to London and starts the Theosophical movement. Also, she is also connected to, some say, the Russian intelligence. And she talks about this mysterious brotherhood, like masters with ancient wisdom. And this inspires the Theosophical movement. She writes a couple of books, and her ideas is transferred to Annie Besant and Leadbeater, and then we have a woman, an English woman, Alice Bailey, that is a part of this Theosophical Society, but she and her husband has own ideas. They want to develop these Theosophical teachings from Blavatsky. They get thrown out of the society and starts their own, loses trust. And this, they start offices very close to Wall Street in New York. The first of it's first called the Lucifer Publishing Company. That's interesting. And they changed the name to Lucis Trust, and they start to cooperate with the powerful people in the world, and the World Federalists, and they start in like as early as in 1922, I think. And we have a League of Nations at that time, and they promote, they want a world government. That's the idea, to create this better utopian society, right human relations. But the interesting thing is to read about the characters involved. They talk about the spiritual hierarchy in Tibet that is connected and inspires human affairs. And these masters, they one of these masters, called Djwal Khul, he contacts Alice Bailey telepathically and asks her to write books that he dictates to her. And it became 24 books. And these books talks about an externalization of an hierarchy, and also the reappearance of a Christ. That's these ideas, and these ideas actually goes back to the Rosicrucianism. A lot of ideas with the second coming of a Christ, and the Theosophist has earlier talked about a new world teacher that will come. And they want to bring about this society, the new society, the new world order. That's what they describe in this one of the books, Externalization of a Hierarchy. And they get very, very well connected to the United Nations when they are established in 1945. And also a lot of some connections to the Round Table group.
So
Yeah.
joining back, all of
Yeah.
this is integrated over time. Sometimes perhaps not massive connections, sometimes very powerful connections, always kind of secret connections. But this story has been unfolding for hundreds of years. And the Rockefellers specifically, I obviously read all your books, but the Rockefellers are quite close to these groups too, and may even either A, have sympathies for their beliefs, or B, see their beliefs and shtick as having value in terms of propagandizing or...
Yeah. You could see it also as hijacking these ideas, because the Rockefellers also have worked a lot with the ecumenical community, Christian churches and interfaith movement. So they've been involved in a lot of these. And the thing that they have in common is the idea to create this world community, a one world, a united world.
Yeah.
So it's you always get back to this.
Yeah, they are most likely leveraging this weakness in humans that we've discussed and all of the crazy ideologies that develop and influence sometimes billions of people, let's be honest. I would guess the people like Rockefellers and other key people at the top are leveraging rather than, I can't see them as actually believing any of the fairy stuff. It doesn't fit.
No, these are people, they know power.
They want power.
That's their religion.
Of course, as opposed
power and money and influence. And how do we gain this influence and power? We use these movements and we use these utopian ideas because a lot of people think this sounds good. Yeah. And to be a part of something, to create a better world, that's the thing that's the carrot.
It reminds me, and again, no disrespect to anyone of religious predilections, but just as a famous quote, and it escapes me who said it, religions are believed by the masses, rejected by the wise, and found useful for governments, or by governments. And I think that's what has been playing out in the way you describe it. The Temple of Solomon then, when you get to this, and I don't want to miss anything, no, we've covered Lucis, and we can't go on forever. The book, you just have to get the book, and like I say, two readings definitely. Reiser and Laszlo and the Temple of Solomon, maybe an overview of that phase of the book.
Yes, the name Temple of Solomon, the reason why the album of the book is called Temple of Solomon, it goes back to a book I found by Oliver Reiser. Oliver Reiser was a philosophy professor at the Pittsburgh University in the United States. And I found him when I was investigating the Club of Rome during my PhD studies. So I wanted to know more about the organization. I found Erwin Laszlo, a system theorist that has been involved in a couple of Club of Rome projects and the United Nations. And I found out that he had been mentored by this Oliver Reiser. And also Laszlo, he was involved in a project called the noosphere Forum, that I thought was very, very disturbing. I first read about Laszlo, and he wanted to create, he talked about spirituality, and he wanted to unite people all over the world. And it was spiritual leaders and also artists, and he talked about shaping this global culture. And a lot of humanitarian ideas, and very good people. Yeah. And he founded something which was called the Club of Budapest. But up on when I was studying Laszlo and this Club of Budapest, I found out that some of the members of Club of Budapest was involved in something called the Noosphere Forum.
And this is the noosphere, like Noosphere, noosphere. Noosphere.
Yeah. It's a sphere of the thoughts, and like the internet now. We have this. We are migrated to this new. We are not just here, physical. We are very much into digital sphere, the noosphere.
Yeah, which overlap or You can hear it in a lot of WEF talk and Harari and the Internet of Bodies and transhumanism. All that shtick is coming from the...
Yes, because I found this, the noosphere, from talking about creating a technological singularity.
The singleton.
And the singleton, and also and talking about brain-chip interfaces. But the next step in, first we have the internet connecting everyone on Earth, and then the next step would be to connect us more with these interfaces embedded in ourselves. And I was just, what is this? Are these people serious? It was just so crazy. And it's just, wait a minute, and this is this Club of Budapest people. We had Mikhail Gorbachev, one of the members, and it was just all these statesmen from all over the world. And you just take one step from that and you came into this crazy, really, really crazy world with a worldview that was, okay, so the idea was not just to create this, we talk about global consciousness, but this was creating global consciousness artificially and creating artificial telepathy and a lot of these technological ideas on the betterment of humanity. And during that, it's a long explanation because I found out Oliver Iser was the mentoring Laszlo with his ideas. So I bought his book, a book called Cosmic Humanism and World Unity. And in this book, it presented a plan on how to create the Temple of Solomon. And the Temple of Solomon was not a physical building in Jerusalem. It was a temple in the sky with a satellite system. And this was written in the middle of the 70s. And well, we could just see it. This is a book by a madman with big ideas. But when you follow what has happened and the people involved with Oliver Iser, you find that a lot of these ideas have been implemented since.
Yeah, so, and this touches on the theme earlier. These ideologues, these so-called madmen, which in my mind they are, of course, it's absurd. They're absorbed, rewarded, and elevated by people who are people of state. Top elite people, top prime ministers, Gorby, the Rockefellers, I'm sure Monsieur Gates, right, who people adulate because he's saving Granny somewhere in the world. All of this nonsense, these kind of crazy people in a sense, and unethical, I find profoundly unethical. The concept of chips in humans, for me, breaches fundamental rules. As Professor Werner said, a chip to put in your skin for money, it's fundamentally wrong at a human level of human dignity. But all of these crackpots are brought in because I think it gives the bad guys, if we call them that, it gives them huge, wide access to the armies of useful idiots in the world. You know, they are harnessing what bad religious people did in the past and all cults have done. This is essentially where we are. The cult has been elevated to our geopolitical control system. Is that bad, kind of?
Yeah, we live in a techno-cult.
Techno-cult?
Yeah, we do.
I sense, and I'm not going to watch the clock, but I'm sensing we're coming towards a conclusion here. We can talk a lot more afterwards. Yeah. But I'd love to finish, you know, you had the holomind perceiver and the world brain and transhumanism, but that's covered in your other books pretty well too. The Hydra, but that inevitably they will fail. So that's a great way to end on a positive note, given what we've only briefly summarized here. Your belief that it will come asunder in the coming years. There may be a lot of fireworks before it does, and there could be crazy times coming. But your belief that they will fail?
Yes. Yeah, of course. because that's what I have been experiencing. And I also think that when we as a human species are threatened in a way, I think it's like a safety mechanism that is awakened within people. And instead of, we can use the internet of course, but we come together in this situation where these lunatics implement their ideas. And it has kind of evolved magically, and or organically as well. But it's real magic. And so the last chapter is about this synchronicities that I have experienced, and meeting people. And I have a personal story of meeting my wife and writing the song Inevitable. That was magic for me. And for me it was really, I knew that it was proof of that we have other forces that are helping us, really. And after the meeting with my wife, a lot of things have happened personally for me. And I have met all these fantastic people that has been a great help. And I describe this also as the people with power. They try to stop the water. And they are building they try to stop the truth from reaching out. Because that's what psychopaths are doing. They are lying all the time, and they have, a lot of these powerful people have thought that if we control, we know that truth will come out after a while, but if we decide what's true, we will win. But it doesn't work like that, because truth, I think, is absolute. It's impossible to avoid it in the end. And so I describe this as trying to build a dam, and keep the water from reaching the ocean. But it just gets more and more water, and it's getting cracks in this dam. So it's like they are now trying to perfect this technological system, trying to, we know with all these disinformation, all these things that they want to implement, but it's impossible, because we are the drops of water coming together, and we create these cracks in this dam, and when the dam breaks, it will just create a flood, and everything will just, yeah.
Well, you know, in 2022, when I first discovered you, and I got that video out, just your talk, I hadn't even spoken to you, and we got a lot of reach. I just saw it as so important, the Rockefeller story. But back then, I wouldn't so much agree with you. I think in 22, things were looking pretty rough, and I was kind of watching for the exit door, in a sense. But now, in the last couple of years, and especially now, I even have people, like really smart people, who know a lot of what we're talking about, and they have said in the last 6 months, their plans now are kind of screwed. That the awareness, even though it's way lower than we would like, the awareness is getting to enough of a mass that all of their strategies are now facing huge headwinds, and there's going to be infighting amongst them.
Yes.
A lot of good people, including yourself, reckon, look, it could be a rough few years, it could be a rough decade or two. They will not go quietly into that night, that dark night, these guys. But yes, something is breaking and the truth is beginning to emerge.
Yeah, we are reaching a tipping point. That's a favorite phrase for some of these people. But it's really a tipping point with minds coming together. And that's the fantastic. We can't do it ourselves just alone, but when we are coming together, things are happening. and it's fantastic. And I have so many, and here I have a lot of friends that I've over the years found. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's just better and better every year now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to victory against the crazy guys and the bad guys who overlap a hell of a lot, and your part in this revolution of the truth is huge. Dr. Jakob Nordengård, thank you.
Thank you, Ivan.
Well, there you have it, folks. I had to foot the bill for that trip, and I also went to see David Webb of the Great Taking book. Did a great interview there as well, I'll release shortly. But just a reminder, all my travel, interviewing, analysis, and integrating the picture of how the world works for the people to understand and push back against the kind of madness we're experiencing, it does require resources and funding. So really appreciate if you can hop on down below. The links are there. Join my Patreon where you get vlogs and monthly meetings, or just give some kind of donation if you can manage it. Really would appreciate that. Thank you.